Hello, everybody. Welcome to 1914. Good news, we're in the 20th century. Bad news, it's the beginning of the First World War. And here's the lineup as they get ready to plunge into the darkness. We've got the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria, and Italy. And we've got the Triple Entente, or Allies, France and Britain have an alliance. France and Russia have an alliance. Britain and Russia, they get their issues, but they're both terrified of Germany, so they see eye to eye on that. Now, what caused the First World War? It's a miracle it didn't happen earlier. It came close a few times. But 1914, they finally go over the edge. If you're looking for actual reasons, essay, the alliance system, right? You're going to see how that pulls everybody in. Of course, there's militarism and nationalism. So everybody wants to be the biggest guy on the block, the most powerful, and they're about to find out the hard way. And another thing you could always add in there too, right? Not only they got the militarism and the alliance system, there's really nowhere else to go for these guys. They've carved up Africa. They've carved up China. India belongs to Britain. Latin America is Britain's informal empire. There's nowhere else left to go, and these guys are crammed together. They end up fighting each other. So that's another thing. Finally, no one else left to conquer. They're going to go after each other. Now, those are the systemic causes. What is the direct cause of the First World War? What event gets it started? The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. Archduke Ferdinand, heir to the Austrian throne, next guy. Well, he's very popular, believe it or not, in the Serbian part of the Austrian Empire. Austria-Hungary has got a lot of different ethnic groups, and the Serbs are kind of restive because, their home of Serbia is right across the border. But weirdly enough, they like Ferdinand because, well, Franz Ferdinand is a popular guy, kind of like, remember from World History 1, Charles V, King of Spain, speaks more than one language, gets along with everybody. Everybody likes him, including the Serbs. Well, not everybody likes him. This guy in particular doesn't like him. His name? Gavrilo Princip. He's the guy who shoots Ferdinand. He is part of a Serbian nationalist group. They gun him down. Austria is extremely upset. Believe it or not, this guy didn't get executed. He died in prison. That can mean a lot of things, but strange enough, didn't shoot him. Well, anyway, Austria is extremely upset with Serbia. They make a whole bunch of demands, including hunting down leads in Serbia and all this kind of stuff. 31 demands. Serbia actually gives in 29 of them. But that's not enough. Austria gets mad at Serbia, declares war on Serbia, and invades Serbia. Well, Serbia can't fight Austria on their own, so they call in the Russians. Right? Both Slavic, both Orthodox. Well, this changes the game big time. So now Austria says we could take Serbia, but I don't know about Russia. So they call in Germany. Russia could take on Austria, but I don't know about Austria and Germany combined, so they call in France. France is ready to rock, and they're going to bring in the British. See how the alliance system pulled everybody together? Italy decides to leave the Triple Alliance. He said, hey, this was supposed to be a defensive alliance, and Austria's the one who started shooting, and Germany just sort of egged everybody on. But Italy leaves the alliance, and the Ottoman Turk Empire joins. Germany's not happy about this. Austria is kind of like the Cleveland Browns. They're constantly losing. Ottoman Empire, when's the last time they won anything? 1683. So, as Kaiser Wilhelm would say, we've shackled ourselves to a corpse. So, not the greatest allies. Probably going to pull Germany down a little bit. Now, before the war had started, they've been getting ready for this since 1871. And, well, the plan for the Allies is very simple. France attacked from one side, Russia from the other, and crushed the Germans in between. It's called Plan 17. That's right, the French are just going to plunge straight into Germany. Plan 17. I wonder what the other 16 were. 17 is probably the number of bottles of wine they drank before coming up with this genius idea. And of course, Great Britain's going to have troops up to help too, but they're going to do the naval thing. They're going to blockade Germany. Got the North Sea they're going to cut off. English Channel, imports can't get in, maybe they start to starve to death. Germany looks at this and says, yeah, we got a bit of a problem here, fighting a two-front war. No one's ever won a two-front war. Well, say you got 100,000 people. You could do a lot with 100,000 people. But if I got to send 50,000 in one direction and 50,000 in the other, it cuts your efficiency down. And that's precisely the problem the Germans have. So how do I get out of this? Alfred von Schlieffen, sorry, he was looking at this and came up with an idea. He says, I can hold on one side and deliver a knockout blow on the other, then come back. And what's his plan called? The Schlieffen plan, of course. The idea was to hold against the Russians. It would take the French 14 days to mobilize, the Russians about 40, plus they have really bad roads. It would take a while for the Russians get in. So they figure I can knock out France real quick and then hold against the Russians and, maybe even, just decide to get a draw with the Russians and end up winning the whole thing. Now, the Schlieffen plan is very simple. The French have fortified their borders. So if you try smashing head first into that, you might not make it through, and even if you do, you might not have anything on the other end. So, they read their history books and said, hey, what if I just go around the French? Right, just like Genghis Khan with the Great Wall. I just go around the thing. And here's the idea. We're going to go plowing through Belgium and Luxembourg and go around them and hit Paris from behind. While the French are plummeting their way in this way, we swoop around, grab Paris from behind, war's over for Christmas. Looks great on a board, looks great planning there, all right? But it doesn't work out so great in reality. The French, predictably, plunge headfirst into Germany, don't get very far, and come back sadder, wiser, and fewer. But meanwhile, boom, the Germans have come through Belgium. And this causes a couple of problems. One, now Britain's in the war completely. They're always going to defend Belgium. It's supposed to be a neutral country. They're going to come in anyway. But now they're definitely in. They got a reason. And secondly, the machine gun. Right? Germans are running in their lines. They're getting cut to pieces, and the line starts contracting because when 2 or 3 people next to you get blasted, you have to close that gap. And look, the whole thing starts contracting backwards. And now, instead of swinging over here towards the end on the channel, this guy's going to come swinging over here and end up east of Paris instead of west. The French, along with some help from the British are slowing them down up here, see this and start building their line, and they are able to stop the Germans before they get to Paris. All right? And that's where everybody's going to stay for a while because welcome to trench warfare. Everyone thought it'd be out in the open. You shoot around, you move around. War of maneuver. Write that down. War of maneuver. People moving around. Instead, it turns into a war of position where you're trying to smash away at somebody's position. It's called trench warfare or war of position, and that gets even bloodier because the guy on defense can hide behind something and blast away at anybody coming after him. How did this happen? Well, you hit the deck because you got the machine gun, firing at you, and you start digging. You put this little ridge of dirt between you and the machine gun bullets, hoping that stops, and you got nowhere else to go, so you keep digging, and before you know it, you got a trench and some relative safety. And the longer that trench sits there, the more you build it up. Because people get in a trench, they try to charge over, get machine gun, come back. Eventually, the enemy is building barbed wire, and to slow you down, you're caught in the wire, going to get gunned down. The longer you stay in this trench, it starts looking like this. Look, they've got supports here on the wall. They almost got a sidewalk over here. I wouldn't be surprised if this place had Wi-Fi. And this wouldn't be here unless they were there for a very long time. Here's the line in 1914. Here's the line in 1915, 1916, 1917, good chunk of 1918. It's not going to move. How many people get killed in these charges across no man's land? Well, you got some of the most fertile soil in the world right here. Yeah, why do you think that is? Think about it, right? Don't need a lot of fertilizer. Yep. Even now, when they're farming, a plow hit an occasional bomb or bone shard, so you got to be careful in some of these places when you're farming. So, Great Britain and France, along with some Belgians here, are going to try to hold this line, and then they try to push against the Germans, and the Germans try to push against them, and it goes nowhere, and it is completely horrifying. Turns everything into a moonscape. Nobody can move. Nobody's backing down. Horrendous casualties. In the east, you got some moving back and forth. The Russians win a couple quick wins. But then the Germans, they finally get it together. They pull some people from the west, which didn't help. Ended up with the stalemate there and finally smashed the Russians down pretty hard. But the Russians are still there fighting, and Germany is caught on that two-front war. Now, we've been trying to keep away from the United States in this course as long as we can. Got something to say about U.S. history, but really getting hard to do that, right? So a lot of this stuff you see in the Mr. H's US 2 course, you've already taken it. If you haven't taken it, you'll see it again. Here's the first time. The Lusitania gets sunk. Now, America is officially a neutral. Now, America believes since it's a neutral, it's free to trade on both sides. Britain is blockading Germany, and Germany is trying to blockade Great Britain. German Navy can't get out, so they got the U-boat, undersea boat, submarine. So they're going to sink any ship coming into Great Britain. And this causes a lot of problems because Great Britain needs imports. It can feed most of itself, but it helps to have some more food coming in. And now it's starting to bother the British economy. Germany, they're eating turnips. We've got a couple food riots there by 1917, unsubstantiated rumors of cannibalism. So, the Lusitania was a civilian ship. You're not supposed to attack civilian ships. The Germans claimed it was carrying weaponry. Britain says it was not. They sank it. A lot of people died, including 128 Americans. We're very upset. The British are upset. The Germans say it shouldn't be carrying weapons. We said it wasn't carrying weapons. They dove on the wreck a few years later. He found some rifles there. Moving on. So they decided, okay, international law says if you're going to sink a civilian ship, you have to stop it, let everybody off, and then sink it. Of course, if your submarine is sitting there above the water, what's the first thing they're going to do, right? They're going to call in the British Navy and sink you. Well, 1917, as I mentioned, Germany's economy is starting to unravel, the food riots and everything. So we're back to unrestricted submarine warfare, start sinking everything that comes near Great Britain, and those are American ships, and we're very upset with this. And then we find out about the Zimmermann telegram. We don't know if Germany was actually very serious about this, but the British intercepted it and handed it to us. How do you know they didn't write it? And German Foreign Minister Zimmermann had asked Mexico, hey, I'll give you Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona if you join Germany in a war against the United States. So, sentiment against Germany is really starting to build up against the Kaiser. America tried to stay neutral because there's a lot of Germans living over here, but when you start seeing stuff like this, yeah, after a while you start forgetting about where your father and grandparents came from. Well, like it or not, we're already kind of mixed up in this war because we've been selling and sending munitions to food to Europe and both sides of Europe, mostly Britain and France. We have loaned $2.3 billion worth of money to the Allies and 27 million to the Germans. So you can see how it tilts towards the Allies. And the British can be annoying at times. They will stop ships, but they haven't sank anything and they haven't killed anybody, whereas the Germans are opening fire and they have killed people. Bit of a problem. And we got this money imbalance. Oops, tilting towards the Allies. 1915, 1916. Look at the Western Front. Notice anything different yet? Nope, it hasn't moved. Right? They charge over the trench. They try to fight their way through the barbed wire. They're getting machine gun left and right. You lose thousands of people and you gain nothing. Now we have colonial soldiers showing up. If you fight, you'll be free. They're going to remember that idea after the war. I remember reading about a Senegalese battalion on the Western Front. There were two of them. The first one charged at the guns, and second one decided not to run. They said, why not? Because I don't see anybody from the first coming back. Yeah, they didn't make it. So it's pretty much a horrifying moonscape and lots of death on the Western Front. And nothing really appears to be moving. East is a little bit, it's wide open. You got some warfare of maneuver over there, but not a lot. And Russia's starting to have some problems. They finally managed to knock down Serbia, but it's not easy. Well, America finally goes to war in April of 1917. Woodrow Wilson had been elected in 1912, try to stay out of the war. In 1916, his platform was he kept us out of the war, and he takes us into it in 1917. I'm not criticizing Woodrow Wilson over that. Lord knows there's plenty to criticize him over. But the Germans just kept attacking ships, man. There's nothing you can do, and sooner or later we're coming in, And on April the 2nd, 1917, we go to war with Germany. They organize everything. We got the industrial war industrial boards. How much, usually in a capitalistic system, the market decides. If people like cars, you make cars, a particular kind of car to make that. Well, now that we're at war and everything goes to the military, the government's going to tell the industries what they need to make and how much of it. Fuel administration, right? We decide who gets the fuel. Going to be mostly military. Rest of you guys got to make do with shortages. Not very happy about it, but like we said, there's a war. Food administration, meatless Mondays and wheatless Wednesdays. So there go your hamburgers. It's going to be a rough time at Wendy's, right? 'Cause all this food has to go to the soldiers. We got the no strike pledge. We know there's a lot of labor discord in America at this time, but for the war, hey, we're going to, we'll talk about everything after the war. For right now, we're going to do our job, do it well, win the war. They also passed the Espionage Act and the Sedition Act. They were trying to shut down newspapers. Don't worry about that too much. That's more of a U.S. history thing. So there we are, stuck. How do we get out of this trench warfare? You keep sending people, they get gunned down, most of them don't come back. It's that machine gun. So let's invent something called a tank. So here we go, the tank. And why did they get the name tank? Because they weren't sure what to call it. They wanted to call it a land cruiser at first, and even a land ship. But they used to code their communications because the Germans got their hands on it, and they called it a tank, and the name stuck. I like Panzer better, but the Germans lost. But anyway, the tank. The great thing about the tank, if this thing doesn't break down, if this thing doesn't get stuck in the mud, if this thing doesn't go point first into a trench, it'll just plow through all the barbed wire. Machine gun fire just bounces off. For some reason everybody wants to shoot at this thing, even though it doesn't do one bit of good. It smashes through everything, and your soldiers go running in behind it, break through the enemy lines, and it's off to Berlin. Except it didn't really happen that way. Well, they caused some problems. They get the line to move a little bit, but at the end of the day, the tank is still new. No one's really 100% sure how it operates. The Germans get their version. The British have theirs. The French copy it. The German one's a little bit better, but it doesn't work so great this war. Wait for the next one. So if I can't go through them, going under is really not much of a thing. They used to dig and put dynamite and try to blow a hole through the line. It only works so many times. And I can't really go through them. Trying with a tank. How about I go over them? All right, aeroplane. Later, just call it an airplane. Well, sometimes it's more dangerous flying this thing than actually being on the ground because the technology is still new, 1903, the Wright brothers, and this is essentially a lawnmower engine and a glider. Of course, in 1914, it's the most advanced thing you've ever seen. Originally, I used them for observation. They fly over the trench to see how big the trench is, how many people are there, anybody headed there, and people on the ground try to shoot them down, so you can't get the information back. So one guy would fly and the second guy would sketch what he saw, and then sometimes one guy flies in, sketches, and they see a German plane doing the same thing, and they try to fly at each other, play chicken or whatever, and then one guy pulls out a shotgun and tries to blast at the other one going by. So they think maybe we could turn this into something else. So they put a machine gun here on the front. See this machine gun? What's the problem having a machine gun right here? Yeah, you're going to blow your own propeller right off. Some people try to put it in the wings, but you can't aim it as well. If you put it here, you're going to blow your own propeller straight off, right? So then somebody else, some guy got the idea of putting armor on the back of the propeller. What's the problem there? Yeah, you might hit it and the bullet comes straight back at you. And you end up doing this. And of course, there's a weight problem, put armor on this thing, so that might be a problem. So eventually, they put the machine gun and they have a timer that can go through. That way it doesn't hit the propeller. Sometimes the timer is going to malfunction, but certainly beats what they used to do. And it's not a very durable machine. They're easy to shoot down, especially if you're hit by machine gun fire in the air. And if you're landing, you better hope this doesn't happen, because if you're in this thing and you go nose first, that engine block is coming right up and hit you right in the face, and that's over. Goodbye. Nice knowing you. So it's very dangerous flying these things, and no one's really sure how to fix them half the time. So to you and the mechanic, you kind of flip a coin over who knows what he's doing. And then it's going to get worse. You got poison gas. Oh my goodness, poison gas. They used to unload this stuff, hope the other side panicked and ran, which happened a couple of times, but they adapt to it, and we get the gas mask, and Sometimes you just have a rag over your face, and if your gas mask wasn't around or somebody had stolen it or it wasn't working anymore, they used to urinate on the rag and stick it over their face, which is pretty disgusting, but it beats dying from mustard gas. Don't worry about that. So, with the U.S. in the war, we get to experience the joys of trench warfare. There they are, up to their knees in water. What's the most important piece of equipment they can have? Yeah, rifles good, helmets good, gas mask, yeah, that comes up there. How about socks? Change your socks every day, you end up with trench foot. That's where your foot basically rots right off again. It's another form of gangrene that never ends well. Here's a color photo of American soldiers in the trench. Make it look a little bit more, shall we say, real. And I'll be honest with you, this looks pretty bad to start with. Color just made it worse. So U.S. Army enters the war in 1917, and the Allies are starting to have problems. The German economy is not doing too good, but they're still fighting. They haven't given up any ground in the West, and the Russians are starting to fall apart. People are tired of the war. They're very tired of an absolute government that won't listen to them, i.e., take them into war they didn't want in the first place. And we've got a revolution in Russia. In 1917, we have a democracy. How about that? Alexander Kerensky spent some time in New York. They launch a coup. They overthrow the Tsar. Tsar Nicholas II is now a prisoner, and they don't really know what to do with him. Kerensky takes over, Democratic Republic in Russia, and they make one mistake. They keep fighting the war, and the people are not happy. We have other people, Bolshevik Party. They have their own little easy slogan to remember. They walk into the crowds and they say, bread, peace, land. Exactly. Everything you want that this Democratic government is not giving to you. April the 2nd, 1917, the United States declared war on Germany, and we start to have soldiers get off the boat in October of 1917. Eventually, 2 million U.S. soldiers will arrive in France. They're fresh, they're trained, they're ready to roll. This is the last thing the Germans need to see. November the 7th, 1917, we got the Bolshevik coup in Russia. Bolsheviks, there was a Bolshevik party and a Menshevik party. Let's just call them communist, right? Make it easy. So Lenin takes over in Russia and takes Russia out of the war. People in Germany are happy. It looks like the miracle of Brandenburg again. Yay! Russia's out of the war. Now Germany can bring everything down full force in the West. And they need to do it fast because they have a no BS meeting in January of 1918, and Hindenburg, who was the victorious German commander in the East, now has command of all German forces because everybody's on the West, and he says to the Kaiser, our economy will collapse in 1919. The Kaiser says, oh, if we lose. He says, no, even if we win, it's still going to collapse. So they got to hit now with everything they have to hit with. They wanted a spring offensive, which is supposed to be April. They launch it in March because they're that desperate. They're running out of food, they're running out of ammo, they're running out of materials. The wounded are walking back up to the line. They need to attack and attack now before all the Americans and 2 million of them show up there. Cause enough damage, either win the war now or cause enough damage to get a peace treaty you can live with. Germany has won in the East. They can do what they want, but we got to win this thing in the West. And they unload with everything they got. The Hindenburg offensive. And it doesn't work. It causes some damage. They push the Allied lines back a little bit, but they don't break. The British and the French, along with a bunch of Americans, hold the line. And even better, with more Americans showing up in June of 1918, the Allies do something they haven't done. They advance. They go on the attack. And who's in the front? The U.S. Marines. They always get the front of the spear. Chateau Thierry and Belleau Wood. Big battles here against the Germans. They win. They start to push that line back. In July of 1918, we got the Marne offensive. The Allies launch a massive counterattack, and the Germans are starting to fall back. It's turning into a war of maneuver again. In September of 1918, the Meuse-Argonne offensive in the middle of Belgium. They hit the Germans with everything they got, and the Germans are starting to splinter. The impossible is happening. The German army is disintegrating. And Germany decides, what do we do? And Hindenburg looks at the Kaiser and says, make peace, you fool, make peace. On November 11th, 11/11/1918, Germany decides to surrender. All righty, you got the Versailles Treaty in 1919. What do you notice here? 1914 and 1919. Oh, yeah, that map looks a lot more crowded, doesn't it? A lot more countries, a lot more cases of instability. Germany didn't get hurt too bad. But you know something? This is what people don't seem to understand about history. It will repeat itself. The Treaty of Versailles, what they used to end this war, was very vicious towards the Germans. It gave Germany the blame. Germany had to pay reparations. If there hadn't been a Second World War, do you know Germany would have been paying it to 1989? Yeah, and I saw another study said it would have been 2010 when they would have been done paying this thing off. So Germany gets the blame. They got to pay for this. They lost some territory, not too much, because some Germans sitting outside the Reich. Germany and Austria not allowed to merge together. Austria completely collapsed, right? Russia, now Soviet Union. Poland is here. And Germany goes into an economic depression that's worse than anything, even the Great Depression we saw here. And when that happens, all the extremists start coming out, right? And then it got better briefly in the 20s and the Great Depression hit, and we got that guy named Hitler shows up. How was Hitler able to get everybody on his side? How did the Nazi Party rise to power in Germany? Well, here's the map on November the 11th, 1918. How many how many enemy soldiers are in German territory? There is not one single inch of German soil under any enemy boots. Now, had the war continued, this would have changed. This is why they surrendered when they surrendered, right? We're going to surrender now while we have a chance from a position of strength. All right, had the war kept going. But, you toss this map around, everybody's like, yeah, it looks like we were winning, or at least not losing at any rate, so why did they surrender? The stabbed in the back myth. All right, so we got economic depression, you got all these reparations, and here's a guy who's going to tell you everything's going to make it better. Pick me and I'll make it better for you. Adolf Hitler shows up in the Nazi Party. The stabbed in the back myth. He's saying we were winning until we got stabbed in the back, and who's he going to blame? The German Jewish community. So they got somebody to blame. We were going to win until the last second, even though it's not exactly true. But it's enough to push the Nazi Party over the top. Remember, it's economic depression, the worst of all time, bad one after the war, got better in the 20s. The Weimar Republic collapsed again in the Great Depression. And, they need somebody to lead them back to greatness, and that guy, unfortunately, was Adolf Hitler. So they rebuild the army. He's going to unite all of Germany underneath one banner, and we're going to get back at the Allies. He says, elect me and this will happen. And that's the really scary thing about Adolf Hitler. Democratically elected. He ran for election and won. Never had an election after that, of course, but everything was completely democratic. Everything was completely legal. And now Germany is coming back for round two. Didn't study history. Who remembers ancient history? Rome and Carthage, right? Now, if you remember, they gave Carthage a really horrifying treaty. Took everything, their entire navy, half their land, and they called it a Carthaginian peace, and of course they came back, Hannibal and the elephants. One French general, staring at the Versailles Treaty Peace Conference, said, this is not a peace treaty, this is an armistice for 20 years. And he was right, because in 1939 the Second War kicks off. Did not remember their history. Now, the United States back in 1919, we tried to tell the Germans, we tried to tell everybody, let the Germans off easy so they don't come back after you, because they had our own experience with the Civil War, right, to the Union and Confederacy. We basically let the Confederacy off the hook, and we hadn't fought a Civil War since, so let's keep it that way. Well, they made a Carthaginian peace here with the Germans. They're very upset, they're very angry, they're plotting to come back, and that plot is about to explode in Poland. When did the Germans start planning round two? Hey, news flash, I've seen a receipt for a warehouse where they hid a submarine. And that date was November the 9th, 1918. Yeah, round one isn't even over yet, and somebody's already thinking about a rematch. Should have gone with an easy peace treaty. But it's easy for us to say because we're on this side of the Atlantic, whereas, Britain and France got hurt pretty bad and Russia's plunged into a civil war. So round two is going to be even worse than round one. All right. Get ready for round two. Have a great day.